Good evening from Texas and good morning from Australia. Welcome to Designing Change, what customers really want. This session is brought to you by ACMP Texas, San Antonio region. I am the regional director and host, Barry Bridges. The presentation will be shared via email for those who registered immediately following the session. A recording of the session will be shared on the ACMP Texas YouTube channel very soon. A bit of housekeeping. You are welcome to remain on video, but please keep yourself muted until we have open question time. I will be monitoring the chat for those questions that come in during the presentation and let our presenters know at an appropriate moment that we have some questions. Our customers, either internal or external, should arguably drive everything we do. However, understanding what makes them tick and the subsequent impact to our business can prove elusive. In this webinar, Alex will share how design thinking can help you truly put your customers at the center, unlocking creativity, de-risking change, and breaking down operational silos as a result. Dodds is a management consultant for the firm Q5. Originally from London, he is currently living in Sydney, Australia. He is trained in design thinking and qualitative research techniques and has experience in both practicing and teaching design thinking in multinational corporations. Most recently, Alex has been working with a large health organization in Australia to define their employee experience strategy through a systems thinking, design thinking-led approach. Alex enjoys long-distance running and woodworking, as well as being a long-suffering fan of Newcastle United Football Club. Claire Marquardt is the managing partner of Q5's North American business. He has over 25 years experience in delivering change and business solutions with over 75 Fortune 500 small and mid-cap companies and national government entities around the world. Claire spent over 18 years in Accenture's human performance practice and as an executive helped shape its energy workforce transformation and sustainability offering before launching her own firm, Marquardt Performance Consulting Incorporated, MPC, in 2010. Claire built MPC into a top-notch niche consulting practice in Houston across energy and infrastructure sectors. A native of Houston, Texas, USA, Claire has a degree in Spanish from Vanderbilt University and is affiliated with the Society of Human Resources Management, Organizational Development Network, and Society of Petroleum Engineers. In her spare time, Claire is a classic Pilates instructor in training, introducing her students to holistic and structured workouts. She also loves traveling to unexpected places with her husband and daughter, whether it be ice fishing in Minnesota or trekking to U.S. National Park mountainside. Join me in welcoming Alex Dodds and Claire Marquardt.
Thanks, Barry. I should get you to do my intros more often. That was amazing. Thank you. Just before
Alex, I was thinking the same thing.
Right? Yeah, I know. Oh, that Texas accent really does it for me. Before we jump into it, in Australia, which is where I am, we always start with an acknowledgement of country. And I didn't really know what that was before I started living here, and I don't know if you have something similar in the US. So I thought I'd just give a bit of context before I go ahead and say it. So this is a map of Australia, and it's a map of about 500 or so different nations and language groups that make up Australia's Indigenous people. So it's the oldest living culture in the world. So it's about 60 to 80,000 years old. And I'm talking to you from that sort of the bottom right, which is the Eora Nation, which is what we call Sydney. So I want to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation as traditional owners of the land of which I am based. I'd also like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that this land was and always will be Aboriginal land. I'd also like to extend that respect to the lands upon which we're all based today. All right. So I think this quote sums up quite nicely why we're here today. So it's sort of how do we move past customers asking for faster horses and getting to what they really need, which in this case was a Model T Ford. And something to flag throughout this webinar, when I say customer, that can mean external customer and it can mean internal customer. So for example, if you're working in payroll, your customer is every employee you pay. So I believe that we should apply a lot of the same techniques and care to the internal customer just as much as the external. High level agenda. Going to do a very brief introduction of who we are at Q5, overview of design thinking, just to sort of ground us in the methodology, and then jump into two tools that we're going to look at today. So one of them is grounded questions, and the other is experience pyramids. And finally, we'll have some time to sort of reflect, and we can do a bit of Q&A. Just a bit about Q5. So we're a global consultancy firm, and I suppose our focus is organizational health, i.e. what actually makes organizations tick, and how do we improve that and ensure that they can deliver value for their employees and for their customers at the end of the day as well. And so we work on all aspects of change and transformation, including org design, strategy, culture and people, leadership development, my favorite, experience design. And there's some photos of myself and Claire. So Tim Brown of IDEO, an organization that coined a lot of the sort of design thinking framework and terminology. He gave this quote, but I don't like sort of just throwing big quotes out and not really dissecting them a bit. So I figured I'd sort of give a bit of an introduction about what design thinking is, right? So what it does, it's a human-centered approach to innovation. How it does it, it draws from the designer's toolkit, and some of those tools we're going to look at today. And then for the purpose of what? And that's what the diagram to the left is, right? It's to integrate the needs of the people, the possibilities of technology, and the requirements for business success. And so what we mean by design thinking, the way I see it, it's a collection of these sort of three components: the mindsets, the process, and the tools. And these mindsets, it's not sort of an exhaustive list of mindsets. I think the ones that really resonate for me are, put yourself in someone's shoes, really stop talking, start making. And the one for me is everyone has the potential to be creative. And so I was told at school, because I couldn't draw and I wasn't very good at art, that I wasn't creative. And I think that we go through our education, and sometimes we sort of get to the end of it and we're like, oh, I'm not creative, therefore I can't do X, Y, and Z. I'm a firm believer that actually with the right sort of frameworks in place and the right facilitation, everyone has the potential to be creative. But before we jump in, knowing now what you know about design thinking, just a quick show of hands, who's currently practicing design thinking in their role? So any sort of emoji that you want to put on the chat, more than welcome to. But any sort of element of design thinking, be that a mindset, be that a certain tool, be that some of that process, yeah, anything at all. Okay. So our focus today is the mindset around putting yourself in someone's shoes, process, and it's these sort of the first diamond of that process, which is the research and synthesize part. So really understanding from the customer and going out and asking them questions and looking at data, and then converging on the sort of the problem that's worth solving. And the tools we're going to look at grounded questions and experience pyramids. So the combination of these really help us better understand what customers really want. So grounded questions. So we live in a time where we have access to all the information in the world, should we choose to find it. However, how do you find out something that hasn't been written down? How do you investigate what they're not telling you? We're never really taught to ask questions, but we ask questions every day. So this is a technique and a tool that you can use to ask some powerful questions and get emotional responses. So that's a guy called Mark Strom, who's actually an associate of Q5 as well, on a TED talk there talking about grounded questions. And so they're a tool to really help us interview empathetically. They're used to elicit stories and emotions rather than checklist responses. They help us understand the human experience, getting to those richer insights. And also often a sort of a sideways question, not necessarily the one people are expecting. We'll put the link to the TED Talk there in the chat later on as well. I suppose the key point here, some of you might be thinking, why does experience matter? Why does asking these sort of questions matter? Why does that insight matter? But because as change professionals, you need to find out how to influence people and make that change. And you can do this by telling them that they need to do X, Y, and Z. But a crucial part is understanding what drives them, what might prevent them from adopting the change in the first place. So what is and what isn't a grounded question? So not a grounded question is something that encourages a checklist response. So these three things don't work well. So what doesn't work well at Parkview Hospital? The overtime sheets are never filled in correctly, recruitment's terrible, and I can never get a hot coffee. And so that encourages a checklist like this thing, this thing, this thing. And that's okay. But we're looking to really understand what their emotion is, what the story, what they really attach value to. And so flip side of that, if you were to turn that into a grounded question, tell me about a time after a shift where you didn't want to come in tomorrow. So that really encourages a story. And when they start talking, then we can probe and we can ask why, and we can really get to that emotional response. At this point in time, I also want to say we don't always need a grounded question. Right? If I'm asking something that just requires a sort of step-by-step process, like locking up a shop or setting up my computer, it's very annoying if someone keeps on replying in grounded questions. But what we're trying to do here to get to that insight, to understand their behavior, to understand their emotion, that's when grounded questions are really useful. And here are some of those sort of key characteristics of a grounded question. So, as I said, it elicits a story rather than a checklist. There's no jargon. It's not necessarily the obvious question. And it places the interviewee as the primary actor. And here are some examples of grounded questions. Of whom are you most proud of? And so this was an example that Mark used in that TED Talk where he says, rather than have a sort of 50-page slide deck on what our culture should be. The question there is asking, well, who are you most proud of? As the CEO, who are you most proud of? By explaining that and describing that person, oh, well, Jerry, because he helped out with X, Y, and Z, and, Sarah, she did a great job over there. You can get so much richer content than that sort of that checklist response. I really enjoyed the sort of, imagine a newspaper runs a headline on your company. What story would you never want to share with your kids? And, you can obviously have the positive side of that as well. When is something, and I think this one's quite relevant to change, when is something said by head office inspired you to take action? Because again, you can really learn from that and understand what it was about that message that made them take that action. So enough of me talking all the time. Let's do this one together. And I'm conscious that we spend, or at least I spend, a lot of my time in front of screens. So if you've got a piece of paper, feel free to grab a piece of paper. And we're going to go through the key steps of how to make a grounded question. So the first step is to think of a project you're on at the moment or a challenge that you have. Now, what's the obvious question that you want to ask your customer? So that could be an employee, could be an external customer. But yeah, what's that sort of obvious question? Keep writing it down, and then we want to take away any of the jargon. So usually that's any words of sort of those endings, but you want to think of someone completely outside of your context, completely outside of your company. Are these the words that I would use? And if you, and then step 4, place your interviewee at the center. So use words like you, we, us, our, not I, them, or me. And the fifth step is ask yourself, will it draw out a story? I'll give people, say, a minute to craft their grounded question. And if you feel comfortable with sharing it, please put it into the chat, as it might help others, I'm sure. And I'd love to see some of these grounded questions. Yeah, so I'll give you guys a few minutes. I really enjoy using grounded questions as sort of a networking tool as well, because I feel that you find out a lot about people. So I'm interested, was there, if someone wants to come off mute or put a question that they thought was a really good grounded question that really opened up a conversation, if they want to share that in the chat, please do.
Well, I would like to say I was in this room with Angela, and she asked me a very nice question. Thank you, Angela. She was asking, what would you like to learn today that you can apply tomorrow? So certainly it was a really, it was a question that made me think, and it was very appreciative intent.
Yeah, that's a great one. I'm writing that one down.
Alex, not necessarily a question in this particular instance, but within context to how do you necessarily draw the line between, you know, brand management and communication versus trying to use everyday speak that people leverage in conversation, you know, socially speaking. So it's like, how do you know when you're overdoing that communication and branding and when you're underdoing it?
Or Jared, I hate to give a sort of a really consultancy answer to that, but it does. It depends on, like, it really depends, right? And like, as the custodian of the brand, you're going to be the one that is best placed to serve that. I suppose what I'd always lean on is what's the outcome you want to get to, right? And the outcome is to really understand their experience, really understand their story, and if that means sacrificing potentially some of the some of that sort of the brand talk, then you might need to do that, right? But to serve that outcome, I would say it's justified because you find out much richer insights, and it also, you're able to connect more rather than putting an artificial barrier in front of people. So I hope that answers your question.
No, it does, and it's something that, you know, I'm in the midst of experiencing, because I think, you know, you inherit a certain value or brand value with words that you're using, and if you consistently do them and, you know, it's got some bad connotations to it, then it can, you know, also lose its effectivity or become like a running joke. So it's interesting. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Jared. Any others? One more. Oh, Kathleen, how's a good one? When do you feel like you belong to a community? I love that one. Again, sort of trying to elicit that story and that sense of belonging, that sense of them as the primary actor. That's a really good one. Okay. Let's move on to tool number 2. So experience pyramids. So these are a great way, or at least I found they're a great way to sort of link the experience of people to clear business results. Because you might get people in your organization who ask, well, why does that poor experience matter? Or so what? This sort of framework helps you frame that so what and get buy-in to make the changes to the experience that you need. So it links what people experience to what the business experiences as a result. As I said, it's useful to make that sort of sense of what you've heard and play back to sponsors or senior stakeholders, or actually just anyone in the business. And you can use it for mapping both the current state and the future state. And it shows it's not just the fluffy stuff. What people experience every day isn't fluffy. It has real tangible impact on the business. And so we really need to understand that. And so in the example that the sort of question prompts that we use for the employee experience project that I was on recently at a hospital. So what do we want our staff to experience? Managers encouraging them to take more designated breaks. What will the experience make our staff think? Well, they might think that the organization and the manager cares about their well-being and that we're all sort of in this together. What will the belief make our staff do? Well, it might make them more engaged with their work, and they'll work on tasks to help out other team members. And then what will that action result in the staff and the organization? Well, less burnout, less mistakes on the job, and ultimately greater patient satisfaction if you're able to be more present in that situation. And so I just want to run through an experience that's quite topical to me, as I was recently asked to redesign our onboarding journey within Q5. And so we've got the current state. And so you can start this with a persona, or you can start this with someone that just comes to mind, right? So Abby, who's a new joiner, arrives into the office, and this is the current state. This is where we don't want to be, right? No one she recognizes, no one says hello when they pass each other in the corridor. So she believes the company doesn't really care about her being there, doesn't really feel like she belongs there. So she doesn't reach out to her other team members and disengages from the team. The result is she doesn't collaborate with others and leaves after 6 months. So if that's where we're at currently, where do we want to get to? So we want to say that Abby's greeted at the door by Jane, who she went for a coffee a week ago. And she walks Abby around, introduces to everyone on the team. She feels part of that team and can relate to her other team members. As a result of that belief, the action she takes is that she proactively reaches out to ask those silly questions, puts her hand up to contribute to optional projects. The result is that Abby becomes a high performer and a real valuable member of the team. So just showing how we can tweak those experiences leads to the belief, or you can say behavior, leads to that action, and then leads to that result. And I found this is a really useful way of structuring what you might hear when it comes to employee experience or customer experience, and demonstrating and talking people through the impact that it has. Of course, I'm going to get you guys to do one yourself. So that project that you were thinking of before, think of a person or an end user who's impacted by the change. Give them a name. Put yourself in their shoes. What's their day-to-day like at the moment? So what's their current state? And then go through that experience, belief, action, result. And then on the other side of the pyramid, write down, well, what do you want it to be? What do you want that future state to be? So I'll give people a few minutes just to create your own experience pyramids. And I might flip back to the other slide just to show that example that I had before. But yeah, think through that. Put yourself in the shoes of that person that is being impacted by the change and what their experience is.
And it appears too, Alex, in current state, it's a lot more personal blame on Abby, as opposed to the future state where people are taking more responsibility as the organization or team.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Jared. And again, it comes down to the outcome, right? Is that internally, if I'm in the team that Abby's joining, if internally I've got the outcome that I want Abby to become a high performer and a valuable member of the team, I will go above and beyond to ensure that happens. But if I've just got if me, Alex, I'm in the team with Abby joining and someone just says, just make sure you say hello to her. We've got a new joiner coming into the team. Abby's going to be here. Then I have no sort of buy-in to what the outcome is, right? And so it's setting that up, setting that sort of mindset and that outcome out so that people feel empowered to take action that isn't necessarily written down, right? They're able to put themselves into the shoes of Abby and be like, well, I want Abby to really succeed here. I want her to be a great member of the team. what can I do to go above and beyond to really make that happen? I use these as well for ideation purposes. So I run workshops where we sort of map out the current state, we map out the future state, and then we begin ideating. And a great tool to start ideating is using how might we questions. And so how might we make Abby feel part of the team as soon as possible, right? And so you can use how might we questions on all of those different experience, belief, action, results, right? How might we create that experience? What do we have to do to create that experience? Well, how might we make her feel like she belongs in the team, that she relates to other team members? How might we, ensure that she's able to ask those silly questions? And so really going through those sort of how might we questions and then getting the team to say, well, let's ideate, let's think of all those opportunities. And so just to show a sort of a how might we question, it's to, and I'm conscious that I think in a previous webinar, Barry, then I think you guys went over how might we question, so I don't want to labor the point. But the wording is really important, right? So the how shows that optimism, that the problem is solvable. The might shows that there are multiple ideas or multiple options for ideation. And then the we, that we come together as a team to solve that problem. That's the most important one. And so again, think through maybe one or two how might we questions to get from your current state to future state. And you might choose to run an ideation session with your team after this to say, well, how are we going to get there? How are we going to make that change experience real for people? I'll just give you guys a few minutes to write down some how might we questions. Anything that comes to mind. So we're nearly at time because I also want to give people the chance to sort of reflect and ask questions. I'm not saying that I'll be able to answer them, but I just wanted to leave with this thought. And so when I typed management definition into Google, it came back with this. So the process of dealing with or controlling things or people. The thing that really stood out to me about that definition was the word controlling, which doesn't really sit well with me and doesn't really sound very human-centered. So my how might we question for you guys is how might we make change management practices more human-centered, ensuring that change happens with people rather than change happening to them. And just got our sort of reflections and any sort of questions or barriers or anything else you wanted to add?
I appreciate the content. So let's fire away with those questions. Let's grill the consultant while we have him.
God,
Absolutely.
okay.
Hey, Jared.
Hit me, Jared.
So if you could go back to that question you asked at the end, Alex. Yeah, so I think one of the things that I've witnessed in my experience is that a lot of times change management is applied once the solution is already derived or the outcome is already picked. I think if you bring change management in the beginning of the solutioning, you have a more human-centered approach to the solution as opposed to trying to force fit the solution to humans after the fact.
I think that's a really good point. Has anyone had that experience of being involved before the solution's already been defined? And did it make it more human-centered?
I would throw one in, Alex, that the first time we tried to do focus groups, we were told no, but we explained, well, we want to test our training content and make sure it is the appropriate training content. So that allowed us to do the focus group and also allowed us to better know that audience that the change was being forced on and know what they would be more receptive to in the way of training content as well as communication. So we were able to more or less rescue what was being done to them and help them feel more being done for them.
You just cut out a bit for me, Barry, but I think I got the gist of it. I think and that's a sort of a key thing that that that's what I suppose I sell into, is we're there to mitigate that risk, right? We're there, you can go along and try and implement this process or this change, but if you don't actually understand the people that the change is going to happen to, then you might go along all that process and it might be incredibly costly to only find out that that's not the change people wanted to see, or that's not how they wanted that change to happen. And so what tends to land with people when I'm talking about this type of stuff is that, well, you can spend a bit of money on actually understanding, you know, who the people are and what their sort of needs are for this change. And that will save you a hell of a lot of money and effort and stress further down the line by telling people, well, this is the change that needs to happen.
All right, any questions? I do see some good content and discussions in the chat. Anybody have any questions they want to voice?
I think Alex brought up a really good point in terms of measuring bad change and the cost of that impact. You know, the cost of retraining, the cost of having a redesign or have consultants come back from an implementation, if you will. And a lot of times they don't put that all within one project, but it's very costly and time consuming, which is a whole nother cost.
Yeah, 100%. Catherine.
Hi, Alex. Thank you for this presentation. I really enjoyed it. I guess what I'm asking is, how can we help our project teams understand design thinking? Because I think they already do. And, you know, have you had any experiences working with those kinds of teams and kind of shifting their perspective? What has that been like? What have you learned?
Well, that's good. That's a meaty question there, Catherine. What have I learned from working with those sort of teams? Again, I think, not to want to sound like a broken record, but I think it's about aligning on the outcome and aligning the team on the outcome. And if that outcome is better achieved by undertaking that more sort of human-centered or customer-centric approach and demonstrating, well, this is actually, you know, demonstrating those wins, demonstrating those successes that you've had, to say, as a result of undertaking this sort of process, that, you know, to Jared's point, we've cut the amount of time that projects tend to take, or, you know, we found that our employees are much more engaged. And so part of it's a sort of demonstrating the success that you've had in the past. But then part of it's, I'm always a firm believer that design thinking shouldn't be seen as like capital D, capital T, right? There are things that design thinking is a sort of common capability. There are common themes, there are mindsets that you can always bring in, and there are tools that that can help along that journey, that it's almost like design thinking by stealth. We don't need to say it's design thinking, but it's just certain tools that might help set up the conversation or structure it in a better way. Does that answer your question, Catherine?
Yes, thank you. I think, yeah, that what you said about helping them level set and align and use the same language, because when you have a number of people coming onto a project, they may be coming from different experience. Well, they all come from different experiences, but they're using different terms, and that level setting is really really important. So that's a great strategy. Thanks.
Alex, Deb had a question too. Where in the project process do you typically assess experience pyramids? In other words, what stage of the change model?
So I suppose, I mean, I use experience pyramids throughout, as I find them as quite a good sort of North Star to direct where I'm going. So right at the start, there's a sort of, this is the reason why we need this change to happen is because of the current state that we're in, right? And that's resulting in this. And then when it comes to designing how the change can happen, it's then using that sort of future state and then the ideation part. That's where you can also use the experience pyramids. But I like when I use it in sort of a project team, I tend to print out the experience pyramid in, you know, an A3, A1, whatever, and put that in and say, this is the experience we're looking to drive. This is our North Star. All the things that we're doing currently, is that going to get us there, or is that a distraction? So it tends to be a constant. Any other questions?
One last round for questions.
I'll just leave it on that slide as well. Yeah, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn, send me an email, send Claire an email. Always happy to stay in contact.
I had a quick question. Have you ever had the opportunity to survey leaders on or teams on design thinking to kind of centralize or baseline their level of understanding and you know, reveal that to them, saying you think you know what this is, but not quite?
Yeah, so I don't really like the term survey because it always makes it sound sort of like we're here and we're just going to watch you. I think where we've done it before is that for both change management practices and design thinking practices, an organization has come to us and said, we've got loads of different ways of people talking about change, doing change. Some people use this model, some people use that model. And it means that change management turns into this language that only change managers understand. And we practice it differently across the organization. So the project was a way of creating a sort of a standard, and this is for a pretty large supermarket here in Australia, where it's a standard sort of language that we're using, a standard process, a standard toolkit around change. And so that was designing with their change teams and also piloting that, but then also creating a change plan on change, I suppose, right? And so it's then saying, what's that capability build that we need across the organization to actually just get a general understanding of what change and the importance of change, to ensure that, you know, we're investing in change right up the start, because that will only ever save us money further down the line. So it's bringing people together, and rather than surveying, because you don't tend to need to survey if, for example, with change, where it's, you can see projects are overrunning, you can see they're going over budget. There's a good reason why you need to, you know, bring us in, or, you know, to get a sort of a more refined change model. So it's then a case of bringing people together to create that and create something that actually works for the organization, rather than coming in with a, this is how change works, this is how you need to do it, or this is how design thinking works, this is how you need to do it. There's always going to be changes, there's always going to be iterations to that. And it's all about flexing it to make sure it suits the organization's needs.
Got you.
All right, thank you, Alex and Claire, tonight. I do want to introduce Jared Morgan, is our new ACMP Texas president. Let him say a couple of words before we wrap up here. So, Jared.
Well, so we also have a treat of our global president on the call, Amanda Schmoke, and a few of our board members locally. And Amanda is a legacy of ACMP Texas, so we're very happy to have her. Just to kind of kick off the year and to kind of chime in on Alex's words, We do want to continuously bring you great content like this, but we're also interested in bringing in leaders from other areas, other functional areas, so that we can engage with them on ways that they are high level seeing issues or barriers, and where we can apply some of our change experience and knowledge to their issues and help them, kind of get a high level sense of solving and thus creating the need for our discipline in more areas. So just, stay tuned with us. Keep going to the website, keep checking out events, and we look forward to hearing from you all. Amanda, anything?
I just want to say thank you, Alex, for a great event, and thank you, ACMP Texas, for leading the way. I've loved this design thinking series that you've had over the past 6 months to a year. I've loved attending these sessions, and hopefully I'll see some of your shining faces in Charlotte in March for ACMP Global Summit on change management and customer experience.
All right. Thank you, Amanda, for being with us, and Jared as well, and several of our board members, some new board members with us tonight. So we appreciate you all being here all the way from Australia, Canada, Hawaii, as well as Western United States. So great content, and I appreciate very much your patience with me tonight and the technology challenges. My apologies for that. I think we have a fairly decent recording, and just a reminder that we will send the presentation out to you in a few minutes when the session ends. So everybody that attended will be getting that if you had your email as part of your registration. We're also going to have this up on our YouTube channel, ACMP Texas YouTube channel, in just a few weeks when we get the edits done. Just remind you, ACMP Texas chapter is a dynamic professional community recognized as a vibrant and growing source change management, talent, and expertise. We're part of the global network of change management professionals, and we advance the profession and discipline of change management here in the great state of Texas. Our mission is to create a community of people who are passionate about organizational change for networking, knowledge sharing, and professional development. And Alex, you've inspired me. I'm going to find out who our native peoples were and begin to mention them in our future presentations. Love that idea. Everybody have a great night. Thanks again for being with us, and follow us on ACMP Texas on LinkedIn. Good night.
Thanks, guys.